Dr. Patrick Michaels is a long-time friend of mine. Wonderful, wonderful human being. Somebody who, it's interesting when they try to paint us in the media as, whether it's sellouts or people who just have this mean streak or whatever else. Come and meet these people sometime. If you have any question, come and meet Dr. Willie Soon. Come and meet David Legates. Come and meet Pat Michaels. You'll see these are people that are concerned about the future health and welfare of humanity. Patrick Michaels is one of those. And at the same time, he is an amazingly brilliant climate scientist. So more than just that, he can provide so much information to the debate and has made such a difference in our cause for truth and freedom. Dr. Patrick Michaels, I apologize for reading from the program, but my personal praise of Patrick Michaels wouldn't be sufficient. Dr. Patrick Michaels is a senior fellow at the CO2 Coalition, as well as the Competitive Enterprise Institute, two fantastic organizations that I'm proud to say we work with very closely. He is a past president of the American Association of State Climatologists and a former program chair for the Committee on Applied Climatology of the American Meteorological Society, and a research professor of environmental sciences at the University of Virginia. I think that means you probably shouldn't be blocked from Facebook. You probably have something reasonable to say. Dr. Michaels was a contributing author to and is a reviewer of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. His writing has been published in Climate Research, Climate Change, Geophysical Research Letters, Journal of Climate, Nature, and Science, as well as in popular serials worldwide. He is the author and editor of 6 books on climate and its impact, and the first book of his that I read is what opened my eyes to becoming a climate realist, when beforehand I believed all the CNN drivel. It is my extreme pleasure, my great pleasure, to introduce Dr. Patrick Michaels.
Well, it's great to be here, and James will get his check in the mail next week, no problem. I noticed my clock wasn't working in my room, and it wouldn't reset. And then I had my wife call me, and the phone didn't work. So I went on the phone to the people downstairs and said, give me a wake-up call at 7 o'clock, and guess what? They didn't. Fortunately, my computer woke me up. Okay, now, why are we talking here about climate science? Because that's what's running this issue. This issue is a very strange issue in that only climate models, figments of a person's imagination written into a computer, are supposed to determine our way of life. And there we go. So I want to talk about climate models versus reality. And I am just very, very glad to be able to do this for you. Okay, 3 things. 1, the climate models, those are the things that make the policy that will affect us all and is affecting us all. They have the wrong input. It's like you're putting diesel fuel in a car that's supposed to run on gasoline. And the models run way too hot. And what we're living on, instead of what the models say, is a modestly warming, greener planet. So let's start with the models run too hot. Zeke Hausfather, certainly not philosophically aligned with most of us, and Peters in Nature magazine last year wrote an article that used exhortatory rhetoric. It said, stop using the worst case scenario for climate warming as the most likely outcome. More realistic baseline scenarios make for better policy. So Hausfather and Peters recognized that the exaggeration of this issue is what's standing in the way of policy. And that is what Joe Manchin is aware of, and he's always going to be aware of what's going on. So in Nature magazine, Hausfather and Peters had an incomprehensible graph, of course, as you can see. This is in Nature, and this is the scenario that's used in the models. And the one on the top right there is called highly unlikely by them. By the time we get down to likely, the amount of warming that's projected is much, much less than is in the top model. And so Hausfather and Peters said, please stop using this model. It's not going to work. Okay, let's talk about warming just for a second. I don't want to bore you too much. This is a surface temperature record, the one that most scientists use, from the Hadley Center, also the University of East Anglia, the home of the ClimateGate emails. If you trust this record, having read the ClimateGate emails, I think you have an internal inconsistency. Howsoever, what it shows is it shows two periods of warming. There's one that begins around 1910 and ends around 1945. There's another that begins around 1976 and goes up here to around 1998, levels off, creates something called the pause, and then there's a big El Nino near the end of the record. That brings it back up, and then it comes back down to where it was. Well, the computer models are trained on the temperature of the 20th century. In fact, toward the end of this talk, you'll see how trained they are and what it means. This is stratospheric temperatures, and you can see a decline in stratospheric temperatures when the record begins, this particular record around 1980. And there's the two big volcanoes there, El Chichon and Mount Pinatubo on the left-hand side. They raise the stratospheric temperature. And then the decline sort of continues, but just as the pause starts here, around the year 2000, the decline in temperature begins to attenuate dramatically. So something is going on in the atmosphere that was not at all anticipated by these models. Aha, well, here's a temperature record that we can trust. This is from Roy Spencer and John Christie, and it is a satellite temperature record. And you can see it has in it a pause that begins around the year 2000 and goes to about 2014. And then there's this rise with the big El Nino, and guess what? It's dropped back down. Lord Monckton is probably going to tell us something that is true, because that's what Lord Monckton does. And we are in another pause. It's been going on for about 7 years now. Nobody's been willing to acknowledge it, but that is the case. Now we get to the meat of the matter. This is a graphic of all the computer models, the fine spaghetti. The red line is the average of all the computer models, and the observations are there on the bottom. Those are weather balloons. Weather balloons are very, very good because they're calibrated. When you take Meteorology 101 in the lab, they say you have to calibrate the thing before you send up the weather balloon. And there are different sets of those data. And then there's a satellite record, which is in the middle here, and something called the reanalysis data, which is a way of fixing whatever bad data might have possibly gone in. And you can see the divergence between the models and reality is phenomenal, and it's growing. This group of models is called the CMIP-5 group of models for the Coupled Model Intercomparison Project 5. It came out in 2013. We have CMIP-6 now, and we'll get to CMIP-6 in a second to show scientific progress writ large. Okay, whoa, newsflash. Suki Manabe just won a Nobel Prize in physics on October 5th. And I've been waiting for a climate modeler to get this prize. I thought it would be Jim Hansen because, he's Jim Hansen. But Manabe actually has primacy. He created the first large global model. And his prize was awarded, as you can see on the bottom, for the physical modeling of the Earth's climate, quantifying variability, and reliably predicting global warming. Well, let's take a look at the reliability of the predictions of the model. Now, he is with the Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory, GFDL, and we're going to use another graph from Christie, which is tropical climate in the vertical. So this is the surface. This is about 50,000 feet on the top. This is the 500 millibar level here. That's about 18,000 feet. And these solids are reality. Well, the colored spaghetti is, of course, each of the individual modeling groups. And the first thing you see is there's one piece of colored spaghetti that works. That's the Russian model, INM-CM4. If we're making an award for reliably predicting global warming, Evgeny Volodin, the author of that model, should have gotten the award. But the problem is his model's too cold. It doesn't matter whether it works or not. Now, let's see if we can find Manabe's model on here. Look very carefully and squint, and you'll see the orange line is GFDL Climate Model 3. The orange line is so bad that it is literally off the chart of this image, which was taken from a paper published by Christie and McNider in 2017 in the Asia Pacific Journal of Environmental Sciences. So that's what you get for your Nobel Prize, a model that doesn't work. This is another representation of this by Christie and Ross McKittrick. Here is the model spaghetti for a level of the atmosphere at about 35,000 feet, and here is the reality. It just doesn't really work real well. Wow, wait a minute, hold it. We have new models. The CMIP-6 set was assembled for the upcoming United Nations climate report. And guess what? It's worse. And the error that was made in the tropics in the CMIP-5 models has now been extended globally. This is an odd field. The more money you throw at it, the worse the science becomes. And the worst model gets a Nobel Prize. Very strange. So what world do we really live in? We live in a world that I call one that is lukewarming, and it's a lukewarming, greener world. Increased storminess. Well, sure. This is hurricane activity chronicled by Ryan Maui beginning in 1970. The reason it begins then is because that's the first time that we have global satellite coverage. And you can look at a satellite picture of a hurricane, and you can estimate its intensity very accurately. And so he takes all the hurricanes around the world, looks at their intensity, multiplies by how long they've been at this intensity, and that gives him something called the Accumulated Cyclone Energy Index. The top one is the global accumulated cyclone energy. The bottom line is the northern hemisphere, and so in between the two is the southern hemisphere. I'd just like to point out that every time somebody goes on television and says that there's increasing hurricanes or increasing hurricane activity, they're wrong. And Stossel is suing them because that's one of the outtakes from the debate that we had with no other side to debate us. That's a winner. Tornadoes, F3, 4, and 5 tornadoes in the US. They're declining. Oh, they were until last week. Now, if you read Anthony Watts's biblical reference, what's up with that, you will see that our government, meaning the current administration, just disappeared the tornado data, just like they disappeared the pause right before the 2015 United Nations Climate Conference to generate the Paris Treaty. It's real. Nobody misses F3, 4, and 5 tornadoes. And even if their disappearing the data was real, there's another adjudicator on this tornado business. It's the fact that people stop dying from tornadoes. We've reduced tornado deaths to 0, except when one like this one here is the Joplin tornado, runs into a big city. Sure, that's going to be a problem. But you know what? You can't erase death data. And so they're going to have to confront the fact that they can do whatever they want with the tornado data, but they're not killing anybody anymore. That's because we're adapted to them. It's because we have good prediction methods, and people pay attention. Let's talk about that greener world. This is U.S. corn yield, 1930 to 2016, going up and up and up and up, despite Malthus. But here's the better part. Let's take a look at global crop production back to 1978 or 1980 or so. And it is remarkable. It's an exponent. It is exponentially going up. Wait a minute. Malthus said it would go up linearly. Oh, Malthus was wrong. And he said population would go up exponentially. Well, population has stopped going up exponentially. It's now linear. So he was wrong on both fronts. Food supply increases exponentially, and the population increases linearly, or actually will stabilize. This is what we've done. And what's the cause of all this stuff? Well, good old carbon dioxide. This is from Zhu et al. This is still the standard reference on global greening. In fact, the paper in Nature magazine was called The Greening of the Earth and Its Drivers. And as you can see, pretty much it's getting greener everywhere. The orange colors meaning it's going the other way. It's getting browner. When Carol Browner was the EPA administrator, I was on the show Crossfire once, and I said, Adam, the world is getting greener, not browner. Anyway, and if you look here, the purples are these are massive greening. Tropical rainforest in South America, tropical rainforest in Africa, tropical rainforest in East Asia. The ecosystem that everybody is so concerned about, we are saving. And it's because of our industrial activity. So, Zhu et al. Have what they call a factor analysis as to what's causing the greening. 70% of it, increase in carbon dioxide directly. 9%, nitrogen deposition. That's deflation of fertilizer from agriculture mainly. Climate change. It's getting warmer in the high latitudes of the land areas, 8%. Land cover changes. Those of you who are from the southeastern United States know that it's a jungle now. It is just, the forest has replaced marginal agricultural land, and that's happening in many places around the world. So 91% of the greening of planet Earth is caused by you and me burning fossil fuels and powering a society in which people live twice as long as they did 100 years ago, and per capita wealth in the industrialized democracies has gone up by a factor of 12. Oh, I have to plug this. This is all in a book called Scientocracy, but that's fine. You can buy it. Now, I have enough minutes left. I make this a modular talk to put in a last module, which is called Do Climate Scientists Cheat? Well, you tell me. Because you see, the climate models are supposed to be able to simulate this. In other words, they are trained to simulate the two warmings of the 20th century, including the first warming, which cannot be from carbon dioxide, because we hadn't put enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in order to make that happen. Now, I'm going to show you an equation, disregard it, and accept the bottom line in a second. This got covered in Science magazine, by the way, right before the 2016 election. How odd is that? Climate modelers open up their black boxes to scrutiny. In other words, they opened up what they were doing to the climate models. And indeed, I'll just read the top one. Whether climate scientists like it or not, nearly every model has been calibrated precisely to 20th century climate records. Otherwise, it would end up in the trash. It's fair to say all models have tuned it, said Isaac Held, a scientist at where? The Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory. His model, as it stands, is the legacy of the model that won the Nobel Prize, and it's the model that's off the chart. In Fussen's article in Science, he says, for years, climate scientists have been mum in public about their secret sauce. What happened in the models stays in the models. Las Vegas should sue them, by the way, for copyright infringement right there. The taboo reflected fears that climate contrarians would use the practice of tuning to seed doubt about their models. Damn, that's right. And that's what we're doing right here. Now, this is an equation, don't worry. It looks at the 2010 carbon dioxide. It uses a standard equation, new revised estimates of the so-called sulfate forcing in the atmosphere, and it comes up with what should be a warming today of 3.17 degrees Celsius. Well, instead you got about 0.9 or 0.8 degrees Celsius. It's wrong. The models are tuned on something that doesn't work. So this article was about a paper published by Frederick Hordan. It was online in 2016. It came out in print in 2017. I love this quote. With increasing diversity in the application of climate models, the number of potential targets for tuning increases. There are a variety of goals for specific problems, and different models may be optimized to perform better on a particular metric related to the specific goals, expertise, or cultural identity of a given modeling group. Well, he was nothing if not prescient. One can imagine, he wrote further, changing a parameter which is known to affect the sensitivity. That's the amount of warming you get when carbon dioxide doubles. That's called the transient sensitivity, or when it quadruples. Keeping both this parameter and the ECS, equilibrium climate sensitivity, are you reading? Are you paying attention? The anticipated acceptable range, and returning the model otherwise with the same strategies toward the same target. The anticipated acceptable range is something that is not determined by a computer model. This is all subjective BS. It's determined by a community. Manabe and Weatherall's model, the one that got the Nobel Prize, has a sensitivity of around 4 degrees. The Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory had a model that had a sensitivity of 7 degrees, and as they told Science magazine, we had to get that number down. That is a quote. So what happens is that the computer is told what to do within a certain range. It can't be too cold or can't be too hot. The unintended consequences of modeling the surface temperature forcing the surface temperature is to make the models wrong, which is why you saw in the spaghetti diagram the large number of models all going up and up and up and up, except for the Russian model, which mimics reality. Maybe we ought to call a special prosecutor. What do you think, James? So, that is my message to you. We are trying to build our society on models that have been tuned. If that rhymes with the word fudged, well, you're probably not a good poet, and neither am I. But I'm trying to rhyme it with it. Hasn't worked out yet. But that is the world that we live in, and that is the world that James Taylor is leading the fight on. I am so glad to see James running Heartland. He's a fighter, and he is going to take it to the next level. And it's an honor to be a keynote speaker for a conference that he is running. Thank you very much. I'll take a couple questions.
If you have some questions, please raise your hand. We'll bring the microphone over to you as quickly as possible so everyone can hear you, including Dr. Michaels. Can you please stand and state your name so Pat knows to whom he's speaking?
I'm Bob Benson from Northern California in the heart of conservative land, right. A question, is there a place where you can go to see exactly how the models are calculated? That's number one. And then secondly, I've seen information saying that the surface temperatures have been corrected, so the graph you show there are done in in an algorithm manner. Is there a place to find out information on that?
You have to look very carefully. There is a site called knmiexplorer.com, I believe, where you can download the runs of the models, and you can download them in what's called forecast mode. That's what John Christie did. It was laborious work, but KNMI Explorer will get you there after a fashion. And the second one about the temperature history, that was a good one. What happened was the pause was embarrassing. It remains embarrassing. And the pause that we're in now is going to be embarrassing. I'm sure Lord Monckton will have some words of wisdom on that. You can see what was done with the data, but let me just say what in essence, what has happened. There's this problem. There are places on Earth we don't have any data. Arctic Ocean is one of them. And so the new temperature records, the new improved temperature records, take the weather stations from the land that surrounds the Arctic Ocean and extend it out over the Arctic Ocean several hundreds of miles. Now, that's all well and good, except you learned in physics, maybe even in high school physics, that if you have a mixed ice water ocean or glass of ice water, it remains at the temperature of freezing while it's mixed until all the ice goes away. And all the ice obviously has not gone away. So, for example, if Resolute up there on Baffin Island is 10 degrees above normal in July, then the Arctic Ocean is 10 degrees above normal, despite the fact that the temperature of the surface of the Arctic Ocean has to be around 29 degrees Fahrenheit, because that's the freezing point of seawater. That's not science. And yet, that was published to get rid of the pause. Another question.
Right here.
Yeah, Pat, you said that. Oh, I'm Cal Bisoner. Pat, you and we know each other. You said that the tornado data was disappeared.
Disappeared. Yeah.
One, how in the world does the government do that in a world with the internet? Nothing dies from the internet. I mean, everything goes into archives and so on. How does that happen? And what agency is responsible for that?
That was done by NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the place that runs the Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory. And they have the power. Was it Stalin that said, it's not who votes that counts, it's the person that counts the votes? And I think we've seen that writ large in modern history. By the way, if you don't know Cal Bisoner, he is one of the most well-read people on Earth, and he's a gentleman and a scholar, and you should get to know him. Thank you very much.
Pat, we have a couple questions here in the back. Identify yourself, please.
Good morning. My name is Patrick Bescher from New York. You stated earlier that the most accurate models from Russia, and I'm pretty sure I heard you say on an interview on TV that also China had a pretty accurate model. But when I heard that, it made me wonder, do you think it's a coincidence that a country that controls their population at will doesn't have to rely on a climate model to coerce them into doing all these other things? And do you think there's any relationship at all between the fact that Russia can tell the truth?
I think Russians physiographically think that a little global warming is a pretty good thing. Now, the other thing about the Russian model that's worth noting is the heat capacity of its ocean is twice what it is in the other models. So it takes a lot more to warm up 70% of the surface of the Earth. And we keep hearing when you and I go to our apparently few friends and say, well, it's just not warming up like it is. Our apparently few friends will say, well, it's in the ocean. Well, fine. If it's disappearing into the deep ocean, goodbye. See you later. Much, much later, because it takes about 1 million years for a drop of bottom water to get up to the surface. If it's going down there, that's fine. But that is the fact, and the Russian model does work. It has a sensitivity, the INMCM4, of 2.05 degrees Celsius for doubling of carbon dioxide in the CMIP5 models. It was rerun as INMCM 4.8 in the CMIP6 models, and its sensitivity is 1.85 degrees Celsius. That is what's called, it's nothing to even bother getting concerned about. So the model that works is the coldest of the models. Next question.
Got one back here.
Thank you. I'm Ben Zeiker from
Oh.
American Enterprise.
Hi, Ben.
Pat, thank you very much. I do have one question with respect to the divergence between the models and the temperature record. If on those rare occasions when you find a climate alarmist with whom you can have a reasonable conversation.
Rare.
Yeah, it is rare. I've pointed out that divergence any number of times, and it is literally the case. The answer I get is the models are right and the data are wrong. I mean, that is the story. And put aside for the moment how inappropriate that is from a purely methodological standpoint. Their argument basically, and I'm oversimplifying, is that the satellite record suffers from orbital drift that's not been corrected fully or correctly, and the surface temperature record has a bunch of biases that that make it, that make it too cold. I mean, I've actually heard this, and that's why they're always correcting the record to reduce the historical record so you get more of a warming trend in the surface. How would you answer that that objection that the data are wrong but the models are right?
Well, first of all, satellite orbital drift has been corrected by a number of independent sources, and they still get pretty close to the same answer. They don't get exactly the same answer. And then I would direct your friend that you're speaking to, I'm sure he has your best interest at heart, to something called the Reference Climate Network, the US RCN, or Climate Reference Network, rather, CRN. That was put up in response to criticisms about the temperature record. It is pristine stations with the same instrumentation, really good sighting, and we keep the same data from year to year. I had it in my slide deck, but I didn't want to go too long. It shows no warming over the continental US whatsoever. It is referenced to a 1961 to 90 30-year mean, and the average of it is above zero, but it shows no change at all for what's approaching 20 years of record as we stand. That's the best record we have. Those are my answers to him.
We have time for a couple more here. Sir?
Hi, Pat. My name is Bob Endlik. I'm from Las Cruces, New Mexico. We have a group called Cruces Atmospheric Sciences Forum. Several years ago, you published what the anticipated warming would be based on the UN's own models. I think you should tell the group what that warming was. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a 2002 paper published in the journal Climate Research, where we essentially scaled the models for what was happening. And we did it in 3 different ways, and the answer always came out to be pretty much the same, which was about 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius sensitivity, or equivalent sensitivity. We were looking at temperature in the year 2100, which is beneath the model, except for it's right in line with the Russian model. And of course, that was one of the papers that came out in ClimateGate, where I forget who was speaking to whom, writing to whom. It said, we got to keep this stuff out, even if we have to redefine what the refereed literature is. But that is exactly what happened to that. But it's still there. You can look it up. As Casey Stengel said many, many times, you could look it up. And if you don't know who Casey Stengel was, well, I have not found a person who loves sports under 30 who's ever heard of the greatest manager in baseball history. Thank you.
Got one right here for you, Pat.
Yeah.
Pat, Bill Lindquist. I worked in the mining industry for 50 years as an exploration geologist, worked for several public companies. If we went public with distortions or exaggerations, or misleading data or lies, I could end up in jail.
Sure.
Is there a case for some, God, dare I mention it, government independent panel to go after scientists who bring out misleading information of the same type that we were not able to?
Well, government independent panel probably would rhyme correctly with military intelligence. It would be very, very difficult to generate that. I realize that Will Happer and Steve Koonin would like to do a red team, blue team experiment on climate change. I would very much like to see that happen, but, well, it's not going to happen in the current administration, that's for sure. Any more?
We have time for one more question over here.
Okay. Yeah, hi, this is Robert Kapleman. I'm from Volcano Beach, Florida, worrying about my home being washed away. Ha ha. So we do a lot of analysis, my company, of impact of environmental regulations and so on. We use a model called MAGIC, very appropriate, to show the futility of most of these things. Like your opinion of MAGIC, it seems to me that it proves that nothing we do with CO2 is going to make any difference.
MAGIC is the acronym for the Model for the Assessment of Greenhouse Gas-Induced Climate Change. And the acronym is, in fact, MAGIC. It was developed at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and it's the standard policy tool that is used to generate future scenarios, or future forecasts, if you will, based upon different policy options. MAGIC will do exactly what you tell it to do. So if you feed it a climate sensitivity of, say, 4 degrees Celsius, it's going to produce more warming than if you feed it the real sensitivity, which looks to be about 1.6 to 1.75 degrees Celsius. It'll work much better. But that is correct. That is what we have. And the fact that it is used by the EPA to run with the wrong inputs tells you everything I think you need to know. Is there another tool? Not that I am aware of, but so we're left, unfortunately, in the world of designing everybody's future, what they drive, what they buy, how they live. We are basing it upon MAGIC.
Great place to end it. Thank you, Pat Michaels. Let's hear it for Dr. Patrick Michaels.
Thank you.
And up next to finish off our breakfast session, we have James Taylor, Holger and Wolfgang Mueller.
Here we have people watching from all over the world, so I will call you Dr. Michaels. When we have margarita later, I'll call you Pat. But Dr. Michaels referenced how the Russian model, which runs more accurately than the others, has a different variable, different value assigned for what they expect the heat capacity, the absorption of warmth capacity is for the oceans. And as he was saying that, it called to mind just how many factors there are in these climate models. And if you listen to the media, they will describe the issue as, do you believe in global warming or don't you believe in global warming? Do you believe that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas or don't you? But the issue really, the heart of the debate between alarmists and realists is really, are we facing a climate crisis? That's what they are galvanizing public opinion and action on, the notion of a crisis. And if indeed much more of the anticipated warmth is being absorbed by the oceans, whether we're having some warming, whether humans are causing some of it, doesn't mean that much if the warming is going to be very little. Dr. Will Happer, I was sitting with earlier during the breakfast session, was talking about a paper written by Fritz Verenholt and Sebastian Leuning, among others, that was recently published that shows that variance in cloud cover is the likely explanatory reason for the recent changes in global temperatures, including the recent pause. And then we have many solar scientists who would tell us that the reason why we have variance in cloud cover has much to do with the varying output of the sun and blocking cosmic rays. All of these factors, these are just a few, must go into your climate models. It is a very complex equation. For anybody who says that they know what the future climate's going to be, they're feeding you a bunch of baloney. But what we do know is that to the extent that we've been able to discern information data, we can see that we're not creating a climate crisis or the warming anywhere near what the climate models predict. Now, I mentioned Dr. Will Happer. One of the topics that we were talking about over breakfast was how it'll be now about 4 weeks, November 12th and 13th, Dr. Happer will be in Gera, Germany for a climate conference run by a sister organization or brother organization, depending on how you want your gender pronouns to be, of the Heartland Institute, the European Institute of Climate and Energy. This is a fantastic group. We're happy to have them here. I think Wolfgang and Holger, or both, have been at every single one of our climate conferences. And at the Heartland Institute, we've been very honored to participate there as well. I cannot wait to get to Gera, Germany, to spend more time with Wolfgang and Holger, as well as with Dr. Happer, as well as with several of the scientists who are speaking here today. So here we'd like to have just a few moments. Come on up for a few moments. We have Holger Thuss and Wolfgang Mueller. Now, ideally, I would be sitting on that chair with them, but we have one handheld mic, so I'm going to stay up here, but have a seat. And on the audience's right, Holger Thuss is the founder and president of the European Institute for Climate and Energy. And on the audience's left is Wolfgang Mueller, who is the General Secretary here in the United States. We don't use that term much, but in the EU, that is a very prestigious position. So if you would, gentlemen, first of all, just outline for the audience what the European Institute for Climate and Energy is, what it does. Tell us your fantastic acronym.
I mean, the European Institute for Climate and Energy, we are a charitable organization. We are not related to the European Union, so we are definitely independent, utterly privately supported, and no industry funding. And of course, we all believe in world peace. And I mean, no kidding. Since 2007, when we started this, we had no idea that a situation like, okay, let's forget about Corona for the time being, but that we will live in a world where actually every year is topping the last year in insanity, in the level of insanity. And the last event where James attended our conference in Munich, our International Conference for Climate and Energy, which we have annually, usually, we had to have police protection to protect us from Antifa. And to make it even more funnier, the conference venue was canceled 10 days before the event took place. And now try to find a place, for a few hundred people for 2 days in a row. We managed because the white flag, that's not our logo. And so it's quite, if you think you have a hard time here in Europe, here in the United States, just come to Europe and have a breeze, when you see that Antifa has offices at the university or even in cities paid by taxpayers' money. And so it's quite an interesting world we live in. But I don't want to say too much. I give you the mic to my colleague Holger, who since 2007 we do this jointly.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. It's always a great pleasure to be here and to meet so many friends. 2007, it's a long time ago. We started this together with other people, so I was not the only one. And our work is more or less what also Heartland is doing, except not so much a focus on legislators. So we publish things and like, for example, this book came out. It's even in English if you want to have one. And we have a YouTube page and all these things, social media, that you need to have nowadays to be heard. And we have this conference. That's the main activity every year against many obstacles and much resistance. It has become really crazy. This year we hardly got a conference venue. We had to go to a very remote place. They take us mainly because the city is bankrupt and they need the money. I could go on with many other anecdotes, but maybe you also have a few serious questions.
So, and it's really interesting. I'd like to provide a little context to this. Now, I first came into contact with Wolfgang and Holger back at our first climate conference. Wolfgang came up to me and said, hey, we love what you're doing here, what we're doing here today back in 2007. Please join with us. Let's share ideas. We'd like to have a similar climate conference in Europe. They have been holding it annually. And over those 14 years, getting to know Wolfgang and Holger, let me tell you, again, like so many of the scientists who we honored last night, who have passed on, of course, so many who are still here, these are wonderful people. The media like to vilify us and make us into these cartoon villains and horrible people. Spend an evening with Wolfgang or Holger, and you're going to be a better person for it. I love you guys so much, seriously. And you contrast that when Wolfgang mentioned how Antifa showed up. Now, I was there, that was in Munich when that happened. I was going to be participating, as we often do. We joined forces. We're honored to do so. And about 10 days or so before the conference, what happened was Antifa stormed the hotel that was going to host the conference, busted the place up, and threatened to come back if they didn't cancel these climate deniers. The hotel, they didn't want to cave in, but they didn't want their employees, their guests, threatened with physical violence going through that again. They had to cancel out. And Wolfgang and Holger spent the next 10 days, I won't say in a panic because they're very level-headed, but as close as you can be to a panic without being in a panic, because they have people coming from all over the world, speakers, attendees, etc. And as news got out about what Antifa had done and was threatening to do again, nobody would host the conference. And they finally found the venue. It was actually the old airport terminal building facility. Terminal is not the right word. It's a beautiful place where they allowed us to be. And even so, Wolfgang and Holger had to keep that venue a secret until the morning of the conference because they had plants. They had plants who had registered so that when they know where it would be, then they can alert Antifa. So that morning when it's announced, by that evening, Antifa had put on, and by the way, Antifa's taunting ICA throughout the time about how they shut them down, and they're going to come and they're going to show up again, and they're going to violently put them in our place. So Antifa now, they rally their troops, they bring a throng. If I had to estimate, I'd say about 100 or so, and they marched on the facility. The German police had to be there in riot gear to keep Antifa from storming the place, destroying the place, and inflicting physical violence on Wolfgang, Holger, Willie Soon, and others who would be there, simply because we don't believe in a climate crisis. It is unbelievable what these people are willing to do. So I'm sorry to take a little time on that, but I mean, what Wolfgang and Holger, they confront this each and every year because in Germany, people know if you host this conference, this is what you're getting. And for the facility that's hosting it this year, they have my hearty thanks and congratulations, and for Wolfgang and Holger for making it happen. So now in Germany, one of the things that we hear about quite a bit here in the States is how the energy mix in Germany has changed. Can you fill us in, guys, about what is going on for Germany's energy plans, how it's affecting availability, prices, et cetera, and is it saving our planet, as the German government says?
Yeah, I mean, just trust me. The thing is that what is really hilarious, you know, when I come to the United States, people say, "Oh no, Wolfgang, Germany is a role model." I mean, tell me how Germany does it. And it's so funny, you know, when I'm at home, I know that people say, "Okay, look at California. No, it's a role model. That's how you the energy transition." To be honest, it doesn't work. I don't want to say it won't work forever, but at least it doesn't work in a manner where we think it makes sense. one of our professors at the conference, he likes to give one example. He says, look at the ISS, the International Space Station. It runs 100% on solar, and it works. It's reliable, it's safe. But there's one major difference. There isn't a meter, and they don't have to pay. The tenants don't have to pay the electricity bill. And that's actually, in a nutshell, the situation we face in Germany. And the role model Germany is insofar anyway more hilarious, because we are not a very windy country. It's not really known for so much sun in Germany. And if you look at the figures, at the numbers, they are very impressive. I mean, the installed capacity of wind and solar, including a little bit of biomass and traces of other sources, so-called renewables, we reach about 130 gigawatt, which is quite enormous if you consider that the peak consumption ever is 83. So I don't want to bore you with figures, but you would say, okay, great, you have solar and wind added together, it's more power installed than you can ever need. Yes, but only if the whole country is, the sun is shining, no clouds, and windy all over the country. Yes, but these conditions are not realistic. I don't want to say that it's not a significant contribution. We all know all over the world, in most developed countries, they have renewable energies, and they, in a significant trend, increase their share in electricity production. But one thing we see is what James already indicated, the rising prices. If you think you have high electricity prices, just have a look what we have. We pay in US cents 36 cents per kilowatt hour. I'm sure that many of you don't even know what a kilowatt hour costs, and you think you have to complain about it. But it's about 3 times about what you pay in Texas, or okay, maybe it's just 50% more like in New York and California. But the point I want to make is that the trend, and it goes on and goes on. And at the same time, the stability of the grid, I mean, many of you are engineers, you know what it means. Electricity is a thing you have to consume at the same time when you produce it. And the moment there is not enough power, you have to do something. And what happened in the last few years, it sounds like a bad joke. We have something which is called, politely, load shedding, meaning that heavy users are taken off the grid. Some companies are cut off without any warning. I mean, I lived in India for 3 years, in the 1990s, and I found this quite irritating, a situation like this, to say it mildly. So the point I want to make, when people here say, oh, this is working, yes, it is working at a very high cost, and you have to look at the trend. And just, if you can, how much it costs is difficult to factor in, but at least, let's say, 30 billion euro a year we just spent on going green, and we're not finished yet. What is the benefit? 10% reduction of CO2 if Germany cuts its CO2 emission by 10%, we would say, okay, great, and we save the climate. Yes, some of you know the formula almost by head, but it means we save global warming, we save the world global warming of 0.00003 degrees, or maybe 4 degrees. I'm not kidding. I mean, it's like, I'm taking, of course, now the calculations used by the IPCC, so it's not made up by me. I'm anyway not so good in these kind of math. So if people say this works, it works for whom? The people who build it, who finance it, who market it. And at the same time, I mean, if you look at Europe, we talk, because on the panel we look about Europe, and a similar thing is actually now happening in other countries. Look at Spain. Okay, Spain has a little bit more sun than Germany, or significantly more sun, or even in Italy. But in Italy, I mean, you could even ask, who is investing there? And I guess organized crime loves investments like this. I don't want to really say that's the case, but it is so complicated, especially.
I'm thinking of a few Sopranos episodes now, Wolfgang. This is good.
Seriously. I mean, seriously, everybody looks at Germany and always I'm asked, Wolfgang, how is it in Germany? But if you look on the European Union level, you can say on average, countries like Spain, Italy said, okay, we want to spend 200 billion euros, of course, in grants and subsidized loans to this. You don't have to go into the drug market anymore to maybe make so much money legally. And point I want to make, yes, it works, but what are we willing to pay financially, and as I said, also politically?
Yeah, but doesn't it make you feel noble doing so? So Wolfgang, here in the United States, it can be frustrating sometimes when we're fighting the headwinds and what people are being programmed to think about global warming and related issues. But in Europe, my impression is you are fighting an even more uphill battle than we are. On the other hand, in recent years, we have been working with folks in Central Europe, many of the countries that were behind the Iron Curtain and understand what that means. Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, political leaders, as well as Solidarity Labor Union we've been working with over the years, are a fantastic group. And Holger, you grew up in East Germany, so you have a perspective too. So would you share with us what your thoughts are regarding the status, the state of European thought? Is there hope for the climate realist message? Is there hope for free market energy?
Yeah, there's always hope if you're a Christian, for example. Yeah. My late father always used to say, if we had known how many communists they have in the West, we would have skipped this entire reunification of Germany. And when you think that we are only when you talk about energy transition, that's all. Make no mistake, it's all social engineering. It all boils down to less market economy, less freedom, less choices. You're sitting in the cold. This is one of my other anecdotes. When we have these offices of the city administration where you get your passport, and that's also where you talk about your energy bill, because the energy supply works through the city works. That's like in the local level, that's how it is organized. And you more and more see people that they come there because they cannot afford it anymore. Our salaries, due to high taxes, are very much lower than American salaries. And if you work as a shop manager, you earn perhaps $1,500 netto, after taxes. And then you have an energy bill of maybe 100 or 200 euro per month. And we have harsh winters, and just imagine this. And this is, you see these people there standing and crying, and nobody can do anything about it. And that's now increasing. And the other point I wanted to make, which is also important, when you talk to a green guy visiting the United States and talking about the great successes of the green energy transition, they always present single examples, like the perfect technology of a hydrogen station or something like this. But which is, German engineering, it works wonderful, it's probably not exploding in the foreseeable future, and so forth, yeah? But when you look at the overall picture, they start electrical cars and shut down big power stations. Isn't it a little bit contradictory? And there are millions of other things totally contradictory. So, and if a serious person asks, so what's this all about? If you need so much energy for electrical cars, why are you shutting down nuclear power stations, which are not even emitting carbon dioxide? The answer is something, yeah, you have to say this because the industry is paying you to say this, or even they tell us that we are Nazis, And that's like the debate. That's the level of the debate. And I could go on, like solar panels, same thing. And then also if this is so great, it's also a funny thing when you go hiking and you pass these solar facilities where the subsidies were running out. There is like grass growing on top of these solar panels. Nobody's removing this. So if we are so in favor of keeping the environment clean, why nobody's removing this, and why does it cost tens of millions of euro to remove only 1 or 2 little solar parks. And there's so much stuff going on, and it's really very frustrating, because now we get a new government which is even more to the left, and it's what they are discussing is
Welcome to the club.
yeah. And it's getting crazier and crazier, and you cannot change the reality. For example, windows are cold, and nobody on the left can explain this to me what they want to do about these cold windows.
So 60 seconds or less, because we want to get to the breakout sessions on time, but very quickly, can you tell the audience about your conference coming up? Where is it? When is it? Maybe a few speakers. Is it open to the public? All of that in 60 seconds.
Okay, the conference is similar to this one, so I don't need to explain it. It's in the city of Gera. The conference venue is still a secret, but trust me, it takes place. And yeah, we have a website for this where you find all the rest of the information.
So among the speakers are the kind of who's who. I mean, we didn't fit everybody in the 2-day program, so it's Will Happer, it's Richard Lindzen, I mean, both in person. Then we have Dr. Crockford from Canada talking about polar bears. And we have Professor Ana Elias from Argentina, I mean, one of the also very active researchers. We have, we cover this sea level rise with Professor Maria Arusha from Portugal. So every topic, you know, of what about the polar bears, what about the sea level, what about extreme weather event, what about the acidification, we basically cover almost everything you cover in your book with really, if you look at this program, professors, it's almost an overkill on academia and research experienced people. So if you want to join us, we would be glad to host you. I mean, just contact us. I mean, in case you're afraid of logistics and so on, we will do our level best that you really, almost like in a full package deal, can come and attend our conference. We would really appreciate it, and that we are convinced that you will love it, and we will definitely organize for you even a special tour of Eastern Germany. And
they will.
Yes.
Their hospitality is amazing. There'll be about 25 speakers. They have the translation headphones, so you'll get it in English. I encourage anyone who is inclined to do so. You can contact me for more information, jtaylor@heartland.org. Wolfgang Mueller, Holger Thust, the European Institute for Climate and Energy. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.